This is an interview with Rueben Lehman from the Valley Historical Preservation. The interviewer myself is Alice Howard, and I'm assisted by Robert Hanson with the camcorder. And Margaret Foxwell is attending. And the date is January 30th, 1998, and it's done in the Elgin Library meeting room. We want to thank you, Rueben, for granting us this interview.
It's okay. I'm glad to do it.
The material will be used to further disseminate and interpret the heritage of our region. It'll be primarily used for educational purposes, but may also be used in promoting development and tourism. So we'll start out with some basic information about yourself. And what is your name?
Rueben Lehman.
And where were you born and when?
I was born in Elgin, Iowa, May 28th, 1912.
Who were your parents?
Sam and Bertha Lehman.
Were they born here?
My father was, but my mother was born in Switzerland. She came here when she was 12 years old.
So you are of Swiss heritage,
yes,
right?
On both sides of the family.
Tell me about your education.
Well, 12 years at Elgin in the Elgin Public Schools, and 4 years at Upper Iowa University, and I took some other work at LaSalle Extension University in Chicago. Also took a course in grain and its marketing at the Grain Exchange Institute at the Board of Trade in Chicago.
And where were you married?
When?
Yeah, where and when?
I was married in Chicago, and it was on March 21st, 1942.
And what is your wife's name?
My wife's name is Gertrude.
And her maiden name?
Smith.
You have children?
Yes, I have 2 children. A daughter, Janet, is in Wichita, Kansas, and son, Ralph, is in Denver, Colorado.
And what are they doing?
Janet is working as a secretary to an attorney in Wichita. My son isn't doing anything. He's retired and I think spends his time at the stock exchange.
Now, when you left Elgin starting your profession, you lived in many places. Probably lived in different places. Where all did you live?
Well,
and what do you call your profession?
Well, I was an accountant, and mostly in the grain business. Although I started out as just a general work. When I got out of graduated from college in 1933, there were no jobs anywhere. And I had a sister living in Chicago, and I hitchhiked in there to stay with her and look for a job. And put in about 3 months of job hunting in 1933. You didn't even get an interview most places until I can't tell you what, but I think it was about the end of August of that year when under the Roosevelt administration, they put in the NIRA and the 40-hour week, and that opened up some jobs, and I was fortunate enough to get one of them.
So you lived in different places, or did you stay at the same house all these times, or?
No, when in Chicago, I first stayed with my sister, Then I stayed with my boyfriend's parents, and we were there together until they went, his parents went on a vacation to Florida, and the bus plunged into the Everglades, and they were both killed. So his son and my friend, we stayed in his parents' apartment until the lease was up, and then we went our separate ways. And after that, I roomed in Cicero, Illinois.
But now when you were married, did you live different places?
Well, when we were married, we were married, and we had just in the spring of 1942, and I was eligible for the draft at the time, and we had a furnished apartment until I was called up, and on Pine Street in the west part of Chicago. And then I went into service, and Gertrude went back to her folks and stayed with them. And when I got out of service, we looked for a house, and we bought one on the northwest side of Chicago. And then that's the only place then from then on that we lived in Chicago. Okay. And our offices moved to Kansas City, and so we bought a house at Mission, Kansas, a suburb of Kansas City. And I was there until I got to work in Wichita, Kansas with Garvey Grain Company, and I was there for the rest of my working days.
Oh, yes. So, then what year did you retire then to come to Elgin?
I had bought a house in Elgin. Actually, I bought it for the lot, because that was the side of it, and I built a house there, and we lived there until my wife had she had some strokes and something else, and she couldn't go up and down stairs at all anymore, and she didn't like that, and we had the washer and the dryer and the deep freeze in the basement, and she didn't like it that she had to see me to get things for her.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
That was in, let's see, 86. And there was not a house available in Elgin without a basement. It was the one store, and we bought a condominium up in Decorah, and lived there until she passed away in 1993. And then later on that year, I moved back to Elgin.
Okay, now we're moved back to Elgin now, and we're going to go back in time for some memories about early Elgin. And you've had some jobs in your early days there in Elgin.
Well, nothing permanent, because I left here as soon as I was finished with school. But I worked sometimes for Max Toma, handling eggs and things like that. I mean, I worked for Bill Miller for On Call too.
No, that was at the pool hall, wasn't it? So that's what I'm leading into, is to our opera house.
Yeah, that was in the opera basement of the opera house. And
That was sort of an important part of our main street in
Yeah.
Elgin, wasn't it?
yes, that was the place.
Would you tell us some things about that time?
Well, there are very nice things that there's. I remember also Bill run the theater upstairs in the Opera House, and I remember he had Floyd Dormout and I go around the surrounding towns and put out his monthly schedule for the movies. And it was a little story. We did that one day and one time, and we were coming back from West Union. We were coming west towards Claremont. In those days, it was a gravel road. And all at once, the car stopped, and it was raining, and there was no ignition at all. So in those days, your battery was down under the floorboards. So we took up the floorboards, and the ground wire, which was about an 1.5-inch strap like wire, was broken off, and you couldn't connect together that. But we found a pair of pliers in his car, and we stepped across the ditch and cut off a piece of wire of a farmer's fence and took it and wrapped it around the ground wire and the other end to the brake rod. Then we got home. I don't know what the farmer said, though.
What about, they had silent movies, didn't they?
Yeah, well, yes, but they had talkies when they came in. However, that opera house was not made for talkies. There's no acoustics to it, and it was kind of a noisy one.
And have you had a piano?
What?
Someone that played the piano?
Well, when the silent pictures, Florence Clayman played the piano. I don't remember anyone else playing it.
They had a lot of other entertainment there, didn't they? They have dances?
Oh yes, there were dances in the opera house. Every year there was a stock company that came to Elgin for 2 weeks, and they put on a play, a different play every day for the 2 weeks, same actors. And then off and on there were different ways now. Some promoters would come around and wanted to put on a show getting local talent, but they put it on. One of them was The Womanless Wedding, which had all of the cast were, most of them were businessmen and around town here. If I remember rightly, Al Shorey was about to come on in a baby buggy, and he was the baby. And another one, when I was very small, I just remember sitting on the stage on it. I was in Tom Thumb's Wedding. That was another one where a director came around and put on the show with local talent. And then they had the Chautauquas. And after they phased out, the Methodist Church here put on a home Chautauqua for several years.
What is, tell me about the Chautauqua. I don't know just what all went on with that. I noticed there was an ad in an old historic book that said that they were a help to the church and they were a help to the school. And I wondered
Well, I don't know about that end of it, but the Chautauqua Association was located at Lake Chautauqua, New York. And they had a whole bunch of different groups that went out for them at different places. They had tents like a circus tent, and they come to town and put it on, and maybe for a week or 2 weeks, and they'd have a different program every night, but not the same characters, because they had these other tents around too. I think the one that came here had about 8 places in northeastern Iowa, a circuit going at the same time. And if they had a lecture one night at one place, he went to the next place the next night, and a musical show came on behind him, and a play one night, and I remember rightly, there were some educational shows too on it.
Well, that's interesting.
But when they made Home Chautauqua here, this is merely a hometown play. But they called it a Chautauqua.
Do you remember when they had the first fish fry? We were famous for fish fries in Elgin.
No.
Would it have been at the pool hall?
No.
No?
No, they'd have been somewhere else, because they wouldn't have had the facilities down there.
Well, now, can you describe, the way it looks to you, what the main street looked like to you then? It probably looks about the same way now, but just give us a description.
Well, the main street was lined with stores on either side, or business places, and they changed when I was small. The farmers came in with horse and buggy. There were no hitching posts on Main Street, but over on yes, on Main Street there were. On Main Street were some hitching posts that they could, and then the Center Street was the business street, which it is today. And then when I was still small, I barely remember it. There was the block where today the downtown park is. There was a block of 4 stores there running between the Elgin State Bank and Thomas Store. Was filled. I think there was a restaurant in there and a barber shop, and Fred Sloop had a shoe store there. I don't know what the third one, the fourth one was. And the thing was completely burned out.
Do you remember what started that fire? Or does anybody know?
I think it was Alf Holzer and his sister Mabel and his brother Charlie lived in the first place next to Thomas Store, across the alley from him, and they think that Alf Holzer had left his pipe in a jacket in the closet, and that it still had coals in it and caught fire, because the fire started on that end and went up to the other end, and it was in the middle of the night.
That must have been quite an event.
Yeah, I remember the last part of it. My mother, and of course, they were down watching it, and she came home and got me and let me down. I was there in time to see Fred Sloop's shoe store go up in flames. So, otherwise, there has been changes. I mean, of some buildings that aren't there, and new buildings replaced, but where Moore's supermarket is. It used to be a blacksmith shop, and Phil Mosier's, I don't know, wagon shop, that's right, he was a wagon maker. And then there was where the restaurant is now, and probably over into that was the Carlos Harrington had the International Harvesters business. That was a wooden frame building. They tore that down. Oh, I don't know. Must have been probably at the time well, they might have torn that down when they built the locker. They built the locker in this place there, which is also no. That locker is now the restaurant.
Where was the town pump?
What?
Where was the town pump?
Town pump. There was a pump in the intersection between Fowles, go catty corner across from Fowles Garage to the furniture store, and I believe it was out in the middle of the street, right in the middle of the intersection. That was gone before I was. But Fowles still had a pump on the street, just off the street on their west side, and the stories go. There's a little problem with that town pump. He got someone went down to do something, try to fix it, and he didn't come back. So someone else looked down, and they didn't come back. I think there was either 2 or 3 people who were killed on the death from carbon monoxide, I think. So I think.
Some tragic things happened then too.
Yeah. All I know of it, I've heard talk about it.
And was there other buildings down at Turkleson's parking lot? Was there some buildings in there?
That was the Opera House.
Was there a tobacco shop or the Echo office?
No, cigar factory.
I'm lost there, I don't know.
Cigar factory. You know where the old Echo office was.
That's
A tin-covered building.
Oh yes, down by below Turkleson's.
Below Turkleson's. That was the tobacco factory. I mean the cigar factory.
Oh yes.
And then later on it was the Echo office. And I think it was there until Ellis tore that down.
Well, what did you do for entertainment?
Well, we did most everything. I mean, things were different in those days than it is here. We had, there were school entertainments. In the summertime, when we were kids, John Faub run the hotel, and he had an old Surrey, one with the fringe on top, and a white horse. And John Jr. used to take that. And in those days, we had 4 passenger trains coming into Elgin a day. And he had to meet those trains, and he ran a taxi down to the hotel for 10 cents a ride. And in the summertime, before time, maybe right after dinner or that, he'd pick up a whole bunch of us, as much as he could pile into that Surrey and take us up to Ball Diamond. we'd all be playing ball, and Johnny would say, well, he had to go and meet the 2 o'clock train. And he'd go, and then he'd come back, and then we'd probably pile into that surrey again, and he'd go down to the river and go swimming. And and we used to go fishing, things like that. I don't know, we went all over the country by foot, and that. I think we knew where, especially we knew where the watermelon patch was.
Well, it sounds like you had fun.
Yeah, we had fun all the time. I really think we had more fun than we do now. In the wintertime, we'd come home from school and hurry up and change clothes and get out and either go skating or sledding or tobogganing. It all depended how the snow was, or skiing on. And also forget to come home for supper and get in trouble with the home folks then. They didn't appreciate being late.
They probably excused you though.
Well, I never got any manual punishment on it.
Do you have any memories of the Depression that affected the main street of our town?
Oh, no, how affected, except that you had a bunch of loafers, including me. There was the main street itself wasn't any different hardly, but there was just a lot of people that weren't doing anything. And not only that, didn't have any money. We were lucky if we got I used to own my great uncles. Yeah, great uncle, Chris Lehman's lawn. He was an old man then. I'd go down there and made that lawn. It was a big lawn, and I got 50 cents for it. The only trouble was it took me a lot longer because my great uncle was a great man to come and sit out on the porch there and then call me in there and tell me stories. But it was mostly odd jobs. Some of the boys did get jobs on the farms during the summer. Not very much pay for it, but I was out a couple of times during that. But on the whole, I made almost as much money having a few lawns to mow on that as I did if I worked on a farm.
Well,
Okay.
now Elgin was sort of a melting pot of different nationalities. There was Swiss and Norwegian and Irish and German and Scots.
Well, it wasn't too much that way. It was more that the countryside was more, especially between the Norwegians and the Swiss. In fact, there used to be a footbridge down there
Oh yes.
across the river where the Norwegian boys could come over to see the Swiss girls, or vice versa.
I think my grandfather was one of them.
Probably. And that kind of stopped it when the bridge went out. But well, there were a lot of Swiss in town here, and down in what we call the Dutch Bottom was almost all Swiss. Norwegians were on the other side of the river. They were east there. A few families, but very few in Elgin. And there were some Germans here too. And there were quite a few Germans around. That's because, after all, the Baptist church was a German Baptist church, and they had all the services in German. They still didn't give up that. When I was a boy, when they had Rueben Lehman came here, they were still having one service a month in German.
I think the Apostolic Church also had a German service for quite a while, maybe about that same time. Well, these, the Swiss have any special traditions that you remember of that they brought over here? Or just something they were noted for?
Cheese.
Yes.
They had cheese, and especially farmers. There were quite a few farmers made cheese, and Ed Grimm's cheese was very famous around here. All of he'd sell to the different stores here, and they were all almost on a waiting list to get his cheese.
Who is this?
Huh?
Who was this?
Ed Grimm.
Oh, Ed Grimm.
You remember him?
Yes.
You remember his cheese too?
Well, I remember having cheese lots of times, but I didn't remember whose cheese it was. But that's interesting.
That's kind of a lost art among the farmers now, isn't it?
I think many made cheese at that time. I know my
Oh,
grandmother.
I know. Some of my uncles made cheese for themselves.
I used to make wine.
Yeah, and wine. I think it was sort of a neighborhood thing that maybe you know all about this too.
They had a lot of wine. Everyone
They
had
had
wine.
all kinds of wine, but whatever could be made into wine. And
I remember during Prohibition, some people hired us kids to go and pick wild grapes for them. They paid us $1 a bushel. Pick it for them. It wasn't to make jelly. And another time, I was just a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old, and a man hired us to pick dandelion blossoms for him. He gave us 10 cents a quart, but that had to be packed.
that's lots of blossoms.
And when I come home, Mother asked what I was doing. I said, we were picking dandelions for this person. I don't think I want to mention his name. And she says, well, what do you want them for? Well, he told us it's to make tea. She says, well, I know what kind of tea it was. And some of the Swiss even used to get some of the big round cheeses from the Swiss places over in Wisconsin.
New Glarus. New Glarus.
New Glarus. Monroe. And they have cheese. A lot of times, various number of people got together and bought one of those big round cheeses together and divided it up.
And then the Norwegians, I don't know, well, they also had yodeling that came Switzerland.
Yes, very few of them. They were yodeled though. Ernie Bumgarner did. And, but they used to tell me that, the folks told me that old Mike Yanny, that had been the father of Mike Yanny that lived up there where Orville Moore lived.
Up in Lucha?
Yeah, well, in Canada. And they say he'd come down the hillside and he'd be yodeling. You could hear him all over town.
Yeah, he was Swiss also, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Or German.
Yeah, Yannies were Swiss.
I said what traditions, and one of the questions is what traditions that they have, and also, or ethnic ones, or why have they disappeared? Well, I suppose the cheese making has disappeared. But why do you think they did? Why they did that? Or why they did disappear?
Why? Because there were cheese factories around and you could buy it and that. And I don't think there was money in making cheese if you're making it by hand. Although someone like Ed Grimm, I think he'd make money on it. Because he has a reputation.
Yeah, I guess there's an art to that too.
And
Well, Saturday night was always, the small towns, was always the night.
Saturday night.
Saturday night is a special night, especially to us out in the country, and I imagine to people who
Elgin,
lived in town. And I wonder if you could describe a Saturday night for us.
Elgin on Saturday night, all the business houses were open. And the cars were lined up on both sides of the center street there. There's the business street there. And people, and all the farmers were in town. And they do their shopping. They didn't come to town so often in those days. They had more work than they do now. Not as much machinery. But they came, and in those days, you didn't go out of town for buying stuff, business, because it wasn't, maybe people would either buy locally or from the mail order catalogs. And maybe they'd go once a year or so down to Old Wine for some clothing and that, because the local stores did not have it. They carried dressmaking stuff for that, but for more like coats and stuff, people went down to Old Wine to get it. The reason that Old Wine and not Decorah, was because we're located right between them, was when they had the railroads. The morning train started at Decorah and went south, came through here about 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, going down to Cedar Rapids, so people could get on the morning train. And the noon train came up. That you could go up to Decorah on. Then the 2 o'clock train again left Decorah and came back down through here, went down through Old Wine, and the evening train between 8:30 and 9 came from Cedar Rapids up through Old Wine. So you could go to Old Wine in the morning and spend the day there and come back. And Decorah, the best you could do on it was go at noon and come back at 2 o'clock. And I mean, that is what caused it, that you always saw the elder people up or down in Old Wine rather than in Decorah. Even after they started using cars, they weren't out of the habit.
Yeah, the railroad was pretty important to Elgin.
Yes, it was
at the time.
It was quite important. It was the railroads and they had various freight trains come through all the time. And almost everything the merchants got came by rail. So they run a drain line from the depot to the business houses. The drain line would pick up all the merchandise that to come in there for the merchants and deliver it to them.
So we had several good-sized hotels then, didn't we, at that time?
Well, I know there were 3 hotel buildings in my day, but only one operating.
Oh, I see.
This last one, the brick one where the parking lot is, was the last one. But there where Mike Shorey lives was a hotel, a wooden, as a frame building, a wooden building. And then, of course, across the tracks there were, well, right where Chapman's lives now, and they built a house, was a 3-story brick building. That was a hotel, and the 3rd floor was a ballroom. No, that never was in operation when I was living, but my dad had a cousin. She remembered everything back. She remembered going to a New Year's Eve dance at that old, back in the 90s, in that 3-story hotel. She also remembered California trips she took back in those days, and she told me that, you know, not only the dates, but even the time of day that she visited different places out there. That was Celia Lehman, you know her.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember.
She could tell the stories of the old times.
And it was way back in early Elgin.
Yeah, she died about, I guess, in the I don't know, around the 70s. She came to Chicago and worked for me when Ralph was born.
Well, when you retired, you came back here to live. What was special to you about Elgin?
Well, for one thing, I still knew a lot of people, and I did have a lot of relatives around. I knew more people then than I do now. When I was in high school, I'd say that I knew every farmer with a big surrounding around here, I think. But
And you came home.
what?
You came back home.
Yeah, I came back home.
Well,
I didn't particularly like the town of Wichita. It's all right. I could always adapt myself to any town. But I didn't like it that it was so flat.
well, I've asked you about everything I can think of, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I had something I thought, but I forgot.
Who had the first airplane around here?
What?
Oh, the first airplane around here.
Oh, I remember. People made up a story about that. His airplane came up here and he's taking him up for rides. I don't know, it was $5 or $10 for a ride. And the story went, you can believe this or not, whether you want to, I don't either. But he said he was taking Adam Bolin a ride, and he looped the loop on him, and Adam lost his cigar and wanted him to go back after it. Do you believe that?
I wanted to.
Who had the first airplane, though, you know?
Who had the first one?
Yeah.
I didn't know that anyone had one.
Was there one out?
I remember when I I was little, they had at the Chris Gregerson
Oh,
farm.
Chris Gregerson had put on an air show out there. I remember that.
There's where they gave rides, wasn't it?
No, they gave rides a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. I remember a plane coming here and setting up. It would be up where we used to play ball up in Shorey's Field.
Oh, yes.
I got a little story about that. I don't know, maybe if I shouldn't say it. There's nothing dirty about it, but they're dead, so I can. When I was in 1st grade, I had a teacher named Alma Roethlisberger. She come from Lamar. I think it's Lamar, or out west.
There is a Lamar's.
She was the daughter of Simon Roethlisberger, who was a brother of Fred and those, and his wife, her mother was a Nicklaus. So she was strictly had eligible students. But anyway, she was my 1st grade teacher, and she was a pretty good-looking gal. And Tad Shorey went for her. And then when there was an airplane here giving rides from up to Shorey's Field, he was going to go out to western Iowa from here. Dad inveigled him to give him a ride out to Lamar. He went out there to deliver an engagement ring to Alma Roethlisberger. But that was the end of it. I never heard of him anymore. It wasn't too long before he started going with Gladys. I always meant to ask him someday, but I didn't. It was a little personal on that. I didn't go fishing with that Tad, but I never got to ask him what happened with her. Whether she rejected him or that. Must have.
Alice, about his military career.
What?
Yeah, he said your military career, you said that, were you in the military?
Oh, I was in for almost 4 years. I was drafted in the spring, around, I guess, a little bit around February in 42. I was drafted. I mean, but I wasn't to come on duty until June, and that's when I got married, and we got a furnished apartment in Chicago. I don't know how we managed it, but we did. They were very scarce.
Were you in the Army or were you in the Army or the Navy or?
Air Force.
Air Force.
And anyway, when we were called to duty then, and were inducted, I went to Camp Grant, Illinois, at Rockford, Illinois, and then they sent me to Jefferson Barracks at St. Louis. And that's where we took basic training. And they gave us a lot of different occupations in the Army that told us to put our preference down there on it. So I put mine down. I said I wanted to be a weather observer. And if not that, I wanted to be a cryptographer. They had both of them. They'd send you to school for. Cryptography was code work, breaking code, making codes. And all the boys got selected except a few of us. We didn't get sent go any place there. And then finally it come to the end of it. All of them, they said, well, the rest of you who we didn't call, we figured you had experience in civilian life that you could carry on and go straight to that. You don't have to go to school. So I was classified as a clerk, and And they sent me to Santa Ana, California to go to work at the Santa Ana Army Air Base. It was still the Army Air Force then when we went in. It wasn't a separate unit. There were about 30,000 cadets there, just fresh from civilian life. They came there and got in. And about 2,000 of us enlisted men. We worked. We had set up squadrons, and the cadets, when they come in, each got assigned to a squadron, and we had about 250 to a squadron. And the office of the squadron had 4 men, 2 officers and 2 enlisted men. They had the commander and his assistant, and then the clerk and the supply man. So we had a pretty good deal out there. There was no transportation. We had to hitchhike when we went into Santa Ana. But we had a pretty good life. I had, and my cousin Rose Reach was in Pasadena as a nurse, and she got a hold of me, and every time I had any time off, any weekend, I was up at her place, and her brother Fred was there before, but he was drafted. And well, he come there to go to radio school at Los Angeles, and then he got sent overseas, and he left his car with Rose, and Rose, she used to pick me up sometime down at Santa Ana, or sometimes I came up there, hitchhiked up. But we had a pretty good time there during those days. We went all over Southern California on the weekends there, and I had another cousin that came out there. She just got married and came out there. Her husband was out in the desert there on the camp, and she got a job it's in the foothills there. Rosemount, is that it? No, I don't know the town anymore, but she worked in a restaurant there at a motel, and she had a little motel room there for it. And Rose and I went down to see her a couple of times.
Well, we kind of got away from our main street in Elgin, didn't we?
Yeah.
So,
I still
if
see
there's anything that you'd like to add about that, by then.
Let's see, is that that block there where the blacksmith shop was, and where Moore's is, that zone. So that after the fire, they started to kind of, and they put in water system in town here after the big fire of that block downtown, and
is that about 1920 or?
it'd probably be about 20, 21, or 22, I don't know.
That's when they put the tower up?
Yeah. Yeah, they put the tower up there,
And now we're losing the tower. It'll soon be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's another job I had. One time, Bones Keipel and Hodes Eder took the contract to paint that water tower. And they used that was used, that thick tar, they had to heat it. And they hired Cliff Keipel and I to heat it for them. And we had a little tripod set up there with the paint bucket on it, and we're burning rubber tires on it there to heat it. And we always got the idea that we wanted to go up that tower. So one day they were away for something, I don't know what, and Cliff and I were there alone. We started up there. We got about a little less than halfway up, and we got cold feet. I was wishing we were down, but neither of us would admit it there, so we were stuck there. And then here, finally they came, and they saw us a bit down from there, and they told us down. But I think we were so happy to see them come. But yeah, it was a way I could get real good and dirty. I remember another thing. Said what we used to do, and on Sundays, a lot of us get together and eat that, and boys and girls. Funny, we didn't pair off, or sometimes we'd pair off, but we didn't go steady. Maybe the three couples go out again, and be switched around with who was with who. But I remember one Sunday we were down where the creek bridge, so the outer creek bridge is. And in those days there was a nice pool of water there for ice skating. And we were there ice skating, and I'd Shorey, she was I'd Toma, she was Shorey, but I'd Toma, she was lived up on the hill there, Thomas did. And she came down over the hill, invited the whole works of us up for fudge and popcorn.
Well, I thought it was a treat after skating, right? That was a treat after skating. Yeah. Well, if there isn't anything else.
There were things like that happened that you don't see today, hardly.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Rueben.
Well,
it's been interesting.
It's been interesting myself. I'm not too good at talking to each other. I don't remember I know what I want to say, but I can't say it.
Well, I think you did that rather well. Thank you.